521. Out of the 5 to 11-year-olds, we did 258 Pfizer. The vaccination schedule will now include a pediatric dose for 5 to 11-year-olds on Wednesday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Welch's Polyclinic. Call 497-4020 for an appointment. That is, the normal vaccine schedule will now include a pediatric morning for children needing the doses between the ages of 5 and 11 on Wednesday mornings at Welch's Polyclinic from 9 to 12 midday. Call 497-4020 for an appointment. Adult Pfizer doses, first, second, and boosters will resume as a walk-in basis, at Welch's Polyclinic from Thursdays at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. That's from this week. Again, adult Pfizer doses, first, second, and booster shots will resume on a walk-in basis at Welch's Polyclinic on Thursdays from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and from 1:30 p.m. to 3:45. Adult Pfizer second doses and boosters available at the Central and Western Polyclinics from 18th March, that is from 18th March from 1:30 p.m. to 3:45 p.m. So we've gone back to the regular schedule where on Thursday mornings you can get your first doses, second doses and boosters on a walk-in basis at Welch's Polyclinic, and first doses, second doses and boosters at the Central Polyclinic and Western Polyclinic from the 18th of March from 1:30 to 3:45 p.m. So the only new schedule that has been added is the pediatric dose on a Wednesday morning at Welch's Polyclinic from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and you call 497-4020 for an appointment. We strongly are encouraging persons and parents who are interested in having their 5 to 11-year-olds vaccinated to attend the Wednesday clinic to get the first doses at this time. Pediatric stock will expire in early April, and then we have to wait a shipment to cover those who receive the first dose after this period. So, as we indicated last time, our pediatric doses will expire the first week in April, and we did have 700 doses that came in, and we so far used 258 for our children between the ages of 5 to 11. So there's still some scope for vaccinate more children 5 to 11 between now and then, as many as possible, and we can get more for the second doses if needed. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Do we have any questions? There are no questions from the
That's a good thing.
Yes,
You know I was coming with one. So we have a new variant. I know it's not a very big issue right now. Delta Cron, heard of him? Mutation between Omicron and Delta. And it's a couple cases going around, but are we concerned about that?
Well, this is not the first time we've been hearing of this. We picked the substance back in December. And back in late December, early January, they were trying to identify whether it's a contamination of viruses and people doing the testing, or whether it was really a true a new variant. So I think the evidence now, it seems to be a new variant. We are still awaiting some peer reviews, but it seems to be a new variant. And of course, as we know, even from Omicron, persons would have had second doses more than 6 months were not particularly protected against Omicron if you would have had a second dose more than 6 months. That is why persons were encouraged to get a booster. The booster increased your protection against Omicron quite a bit. And I think Pfizer is now actually working on a fourth booster, and Pfizer has recommended that there may be need for a fourth booster to take into consideration the changes that would have escaped the current vaccines from Omicron and any future changes. So of course, with any variation, with any mutation, we are concerned. But I think if we increase our protections through the boosters, And if we await the new research that's going to come out that Pfizer is working on and other people are working on, I think we should be in good stead. In addition to that, I think if we continue with our regular respiratory hygiene and all this type of stuff, I think we can be in good position. So we're not really to a point where we are panicking, because we do have some of the quivers, some of the arrows in our quiver, in particular booster, which is still quite protective compared to if you don't have the booster. It protects you against serious illness, hospitalization, and death. So we are encouraging persons to take the booster to protect them against Omicron and another variant that may come. Because as I've been indicating for the last 2 years, viruses change. That is what they do. They don't have a brain, so they can't figure things out. But they do change in their genetics to be able to evade immunity. And that's what they do. And certainly, as I often mention, if you make a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, at some point in time, the photocopy down 100 spots is different to the original document. And that's what happens when a virus changes. A virus basically replicates so quickly that it will change, because the copies of itself can change over a period of time. So that is what viruses do, and we just have to remain on guard.
Talking of boosters, in some other countries, there's mention of a fourth booster. Is that something that's likely to happen here?
I just mentioned that. That there may be a need. Yes. I just mentioned that. I'm certain, but it will be a second booster, which will be a fourth shot, because we only had one booster so far, right? And certainly these boosters, they are now looking into that for sure, but more than likely there may be a need. And with the research from Pfizer showing that they may have to change the formulation, so to speak, to take into consideration the new genetics of the new viruses.
Of course, this question is directed to the Permanent Secretary for Health, as relates to the wearing of masks. As far as I'm aware, the wearing of masks is still mandatory on Anguilla. Is that so?
In certain conditions.
What are the conditions?
Inside, in an area where it's not possible social distancing, but not on the outside.
That has been widely explained to, in particular, our visitors to Anguilla.
Well,
Because I have seen throughout the island, in most places where I go, pardon me if I use the word color, but the persons who would appear to be tourists to the island don't seem to wear any mask.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking if that is something that is mandatory throughout the board, or just for certain people.
Well, of course, with regard to any regulation, enforcing a regulation is what keeps people in check.
Yes.
Certainly, yes, the regulation is in place for persons on the inside where physical distancing is not possible. It is not in place for persons on the outside. That changed some months ago. And certainly we are now looking into that again, because of course we make these determinations based on the epidemiological situation in the country. So we're going to be announcing some stuff shortly on new protocols. But certainly if persons who are interior and the place is not possible social distancing, then they should be wearing masks. And then it's a matter of policing, ensuring that the regulations are kept in check.
One other question, it should have come earlier, but since that I wasn't here for quite a long time, I think it would be still in place to ask you, sir, and probably by extension to the entire government. I know prior to the vaccines being on island, there was a question relating to how the particular Pfizer vaccine would have been stored in terms of the coldness or what have you. And all of a sudden we heard sometime later on that the Pfizer vaccine would now be made available on Anguilla. What was the change? But as it relates to the vaccine? Where's the difference in the Pfizer vaccine, difference in the cold chain, or what have you? Because
Yeah, certainly there's a capacity to store. When we were first beginning,
yes,
of course, and still is, the AstraZeneca vaccine is much easier to deal with. The temperature of storage is a regular fridge. You can put them in a regular fridge, and certainly, and that is why up to the date, AstraZeneca is the vaccine that's been to most of the parts of the world where electricity is an issue or where cold chain is an issue. So we did have refrigerations to hold large amounts of AstraZeneca, huge fridges to hold large amounts of AstraZeneca. We did not have a freezer to hold large amounts of Pfizer. In fact, the only two overseas territories that were given Pfizer, based on the assessment of the British, were Turks and Caicos and I think Bermuda, right? Because the other overseas territories, whether it was BVI, Anguilla, or Montserrat, they don't have the capacity to store the Pfizer. The smaller numbers of the Pfizer we have now, we do have a freezer that goes down to -80. It's a laboratory freezer that is used for other functions in the lab. We were able to commandeer a small space of that, about 2 feet wide by 2 feet square, to be able to hold small batches of Pfizer. That is where we have been storing it for the last few months, and we were able to convince our colleagues that we could store it there. But it's not a freezer that's solely dedicated to vaccinations. It's a freezer we're able to accommodate a small spot, about 2 by 2 feet square, to be able to hold the Pfizer. That we could not accommodate that initially with the whole numbers of that we had before. And certainly, we would prefer if our fridges and freezers are solely dedicated to our vaccines, and that is why we, and in particular in the beginning, that is why we only use our special fridges and only use AstraZeneca. But we were able to come together with a protocol with a lab to ensure that the 2 by 2 space that we're using for Pfizer is properly managed and that we don't have any, untoward actions there. So that's because of the smaller numbers. So that's the reason why we couldn't use it before, and that's the reason why we're using it now, because of the storage capacity.
Are there no further questions? Okay, thank you, yes, Mr. Rogers, for his intervention this afternoon, and we will now is the task ahead. Thanks, Mr. Rogers. Okay, so we have the Minister of Social Development, Honourable Bianca Rogers. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a couple of dates for you today. So this afternoon, I attended the inaugural Robert and Dr. Janice Strasser Preschool Teacher Scholarship. Dr. Strasser and her husband have donated 2 scholarships, preschool level scholarships, for preschool teachers in Anguilla, and will be doing so for the future. This is a scholarship for 2 bachelor level degrees at the University of the West Indies. So we've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Strasser within early childhood education for some years now, and they've taken their contributions to the education sector to the next level by donating or sponsoring 2 teachers bachelor level degrees at the University of the West Indies. As it relates to education, last week I would have attended the OECS Caucus of Ministers of Education, where we would have been identifying various challenges affecting the education sector across the region, specifically with tertiary level education and funding across the region. We discussed strategies as to how we can ensure that our citizens can have access to higher education, concurrent with plans to how we can mobilize and get regional community colleges to work together. And we're also going to be having a series of meetings and conversations surrounding assessments internationally and regionally, given the fact that the UK and a number of other states have been changing their assessment methodologies. As it relates to decriminalization, we went through a number of public consultations and drafting of regulations as related to decriminalization. These regulations were then forwarded to council, and the governor's office would have sent these regulations over and off to the FCDO, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK for approval, because they engage the Convention on Narcotics and require the United Kingdom's assent before it can be enforced in Anguilla. Today and for the next 4 days, I will be attending the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, their 65th Commission on Narcotic Drugs, as they are the body responsible for drug-related matters. Anguilla will be attending as the overseas territory to the plenary. It's actually happening as we speak right now, so I'm missing out on a number of topics, but we will also be attending during the course of this week as an observer, and this will hopefully allow us to have some discussion as to the associated status of cannabis within the schedules and next steps for decriminalization globally. The Lansambole Cultural Center Redevelopment Committee has just had its first meeting. We've been looking as to how we can redevelop the LBCC for a couple of months. We were in search for the plans for the Lansambole Cultural Center, but unfortunately no drawings for the current center have been located. And we then established a committee to review the current site, to make suggestions for its redevelopment, and then to submit these suggestions to council. And then finally, this week marks the beginning of Social Work Month, where we acknowledge the contributions of social workers internationally and regionally. And we will be having a number of events which will be published on the Department of Social Development's Facebook page and on Radio Anguilla. So you can look out for those events if you have any questions.
Good afternoon. My question is outside of your presentation. Could you tell us about the latest development today, what we're hearing about a student threatening to commit a heinous crime in the school?
Well, I can't go into too much detail as it relates to the situation at the school with the relation to the student. What we do know at the moment is that it is being investigated not only within the school, but the Royal Anguilla Police Force are conducting an investigation to ensure that if a crime has been committed, that it is being dealt with to the fullest extent.
Based on that situation, are there plans by the Ministry and the Department of Education perhaps to increase security at all the schools?
Well, we have been increasing security. Over the past 2 years, the Department and Ministry of Education have increased security around all of the high school plants. We have increased patrols, we've increased security presence, and we've increased funding associated with security. So that has been a constant for over the past 2 years. The last update in terms of security proposals was last September, and if the need occurs that we have to increase security, we will make that decision.
But the student, would he be able to attend school, or will he be suspended for a couple of days? How would they go through to determine the legitimacy of the threat?
Well, that's why they're conducting an investigation. So once that investigation is complete, then we'll have the information necessary to make a determination as to whether or not further measures need to be taken to the student involved in this particular matter.
Questions for the Minister? Thank you very much, Minister. We go across to the Minister of Infrastructure. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Minister. Just a quick update on my ministry that also includes tourism. We are very happy with the level of activity as it relates to tourism. We've been doing a significant amount of not only marketing, but working with the health team to evolve the protocols to allow for easy travel into Anguilla since we've come to office. When we came to office, first of 2020, Anguilla was shut down. The tourism plant was shut. There were no hotels open, no villas open. The economy was in free fall. So it was important for us to get people back to work. We opened our hotels, we opened our over the last 2 months. We are to be competitive. I'd like to share some numbers as it relates to passenger at the Clayton Jail Airport, which have not been void of a private jet since December of 2021. So on Friday, the 11th, we had 53 movements, that is flights in and out of the Clayton J. Lloyd International. On Saturday, the 12th, we had 105 movements of jets and planes in and out of the airport. And on Sunday, we had 98 movements of planes in and out and jets in and out of the airport, and that is significant for us. Also, we had through the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal, we had 1,847 persons moving through the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal over the weekend. On the 11th, we had 163 persons coming in, 187 going out, and 68 boat movements between Anguilla and St. Martin's. On Saturday, 488 persons coming in, 429 persons leaving, with 168 boat movements. And on the 13th of March, which would have been yesterday, we had 112 boat movements. And total over this weekend, 829 persons leaving, and 348 total boat movements. So that is significant. Also, we have seen an increase in traffic moving to the Marigot terminal. When we initially started, it was 2 to 3 persons per trip. And over the weekend, we had 370 persons traverse the waters between Anguilla and Marigot. So that sector is starting to come back, and we extend our gratitude to the ferry boat operators in the Marigot that have really suffered during the shutdown. They are the last to embark on participation of the economy that we are creating. On the Dutch side, we have 1,477 persons that move between Anguilla and the Dutch side. So even though we have a significant amount of persons and movements into the airdrome, we still have a significant amount of persons moving through Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. So it means, therefore, that our plan to ensure that all the ships rise, all ships and planes, both air and seaport, is viable, is working and is bearing fruit. and the fruit is tangible, because we've had requests from the Taxi Association to even grant more taxi licenses. And that is different, because we've never in the past had the Taxi Association really asking to grant more licenses. But as you know, taxi licenses is not granted through the ministry, even though it comes under the Ministry of Infrastructure and Tourism. It is not granted by the Minister of Infrastructure and Tourism, as persons may believe. It is granted through the taxi board, which is chaired by the Commissioner of Police, or his designate, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Tourism, a representative from the Anguilla Taxi Association, two representatives from Anguilla Taxi Association, and a representative from the Anguilla Tourist Board, and those are the persons who would grant taxi licenses. We've also had a request from the Taxi Association to review and increase the taxi rates. We have not done so yet. We are looking at it, we are examining it, and at some point we'll make a decision after consultation into the viability of doing so. I just want to also place on record, because I heard a number of persons talking about the bulk fuel, the $750,000 bulk fuel tax that have been administered on the large companies that bring in fuel into Anguilla, namely Sol and Delta Petroleum. $750,000 one-off tax. That amounts to 56 cents per gallon when you go to the pump. 56 cents. I'm not sure right off the bat what is the cost per gallon, but I know it's going up everywhere in the world. And I'm sure it's going to go up in Anguilla, but the 50 cents EC is a marginal amount when you take into consideration how much we are paying on a gallon of fuel. But I just wanted to be clear that it's 56 cents per gallon when you go to the pump to fuel up your tank. So that's where we are. We've also had a request from the Board of Directors of Anglic. We just had a request to meet with them because they have announced that they will be increasing the fuel surcharge, and so they have requested, and the Premier and I will meet with them this week to discuss the same. They say that it's unavoidable due to the global hikes in fuel, but we also know that last year there were plans to increase the fuel surcharge, which too was unavoidable, because as the fuel cost goes up, they have to ensure that Anglic continues to be viable. But that underscores the need, the urgent need for us to diversify into renewable sources of energy. And I've never seen the sun go out. In all my life on this earth, I've never seen the sun go out. And Germany and the United Kingdom are some of the global leaders in renewable energy from solar. And there's no reason why we in Anguilla cannot move into that sphere. We've been talking about renewable energy for the better part of 30 years, and we really believe that change can't wait. And so we have asked, and we have begged, and we have written to the Board of Directors about renewable energy integration. They have said to us that they are on the verge of issuing an RFP for solar energy. There's no shortage of companies in the world that can do so. We ourselves have been feeling a number of persons discussing the possibility of renewable energy integration, and this is something that we have to do in order to ensure that we have a reliable, stable source of energy. Energy cost is driving up the cost of living everywhere in the world, and so we have to be prepared. We have to ensure that we are as resilient as possible to stave off the things that we cannot control, such as wars in Europe and wars in these oil-producing countries, and the dictates of OPEC and the oil-producing countries. So this is something that we are keen about, and this is something that, as the minister responsible for energy, I will be working very hard on over the next few months, and doing whatever is necessary to bring about that change. Let me move on to some of the infrastructure projects, such as the road that leads into the new Albina Lake Arch Comprehensive School that is progressing, and also the Carteret Boulevard is progressing well. Today, they will complete the sidewalk that leads from the Anglican Church over to the runabout adjacent to the James Ronald Webster Park. That will be completed as well as the driveways into the environmental health department and the driveway, the other driveway into the burial ground of the Anglican Church. Those will be completed today, and tomorrow they will be paving the entire length on both sides of the road, and then on Wednesday they will be paving the middle. So by Wednesday afternoon, the entire northern side of the Carteret Boulevard will be completed. And then Thursday and into the weekend, we'll be finishing the roundabout over at the Social Security Digicel Junction. And once that is done, the heavy lifting as it relates to the Carteret Boulevard will be done. I've written to some of our partners about the provision of plants, and as I said before, I have a nice list of persons who I believe will be anxious to assist in the tree planting program because of the concerns of the trees, and so we plan to plant much more trees than what was taken down. And then if anyone were to traverse that road, and I know one of our journalists here, every day he makes sure that he takes a look at the road, you can see that the tamarind trees that were there, we could not incorporate them in the development of this road. But needless to say, when we are completed with that road, it'll be a masterpiece. It will be a place where people want to drive on. People will be driving to the valley just to drive there on the Carteret Boulevard. People will be driving to the valley just to walk on the sidewalks on either side of the Carteret Boulevard. So we're excited about that, because the tongue of any country, the city, is supposed to look like the city. And this is what we seek to do, to ensure that the city reflects who we are as a people. So the medians is also going to be, they are already framed. They'll be poured over this week. We're also doing a bit of remedial work to the People's Market. We have some paint in the ministry, so we'll be painting over the People's Market. We'll be doing some work to the parking lot to ensure that when it rains, you'll be all right. And when we have our next market day, it'll be something to behold. Electricity is being installed, water is already there, the bathrooms are working. As you know, the St. Lucia Anguillan Association replaced the roof for us. So we are moving very well to ensure that all of the area is aesthetically pleasing. We're also looking at the possibility of, right now, at the possibility of the street lights, which will be solar powered along the road. So we really want to create an environment where people will be happy to be. And also at the People's Market, one of the reasons why we are installing lights and the like is that so the hours for the People's Market can be extended into the evening if persons want to run in and grab some provisions or fish or whatever that will be sold at the People's Market. So we are on track. We are on track in terms of the Carteret Boulevard for the ending of the month. As you know, I gave them a deadline of the 22nd of March. That deadline have been pushed, but in terms of the opening of the Carteret Boulevard, so that everyone can drive on the Carteret Boulevard, we still have the date as the end of the month. Perhaps on the 1st of April is a significant day. So that might be the day that we may open for all vehicular traffic. And I don't see anything wrong with April 1st. It's a very important and significant day, especially to those who were born on that day. So I don't know if you have any questions as it relates to what I've spoken about. But before I go on, I just want to mention something, because I had some discussions with the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Health in St. Martin. And it's related to the protocols to go into St. Martin, that side, because a number of persons have been missing their flights, missing their onward travel, and some of them have been denied entry into St. Martin because the protocols in St. Martin changed as of March 1st, 2022. And I just want to read them out so that persons will understand, and I will be able to share these afterwards as well. As of March 1st, 2022, all fully vaccinated, 2 doses or booster third dose persons no longer require a test to enter St. Martin. They simply need to fill out the application and upload their vaccine documents in order to be approved. Unvaccinated persons will require a 48 test to be allowed entry into St. Martin. Travelers who have recovered from COVID-19 infection within 8 months before departure must upload one of the below acceptable proof of recovery: a government or public health authority issued proof of recovery, digital COVID required recovery certificate or letter, A lab-issued positive COVID-19 PCR test results also indicating a CT value of 35 or higher. A signed and stamped COVID-19 recovery letter from a physician accompanied by the positive COVID-19 PCR test result. You're also considered fully vaccinated with an accepted vaccine 2 weeks after the second dose in a 2-dose series such as Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, Sinovac, CoronaVac, Covishield vaccines, or 2 weeks after a single-dose vaccine such as Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or 2 weeks after the second dose of a 2-dose series of combination of a single-dose Pfizer or Moderna with a single-dose AstraZeneca, or 2 weeks after a single dose of vaccine after confirmed COVID-19 infection within 6 months before vaccination, to be stated on proof of vaccination in absence of digital COVID-19 infection certificate. So they asked me to relay this information via the press conference today, and I've done so, and I will also make this information available to anyone so that we would not have those issues that have occurred in the past. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, you've given us quite a bit. I'll try to shorten my questions and we'll share as we go along. But you mentioned that the Anglican board requested a meeting. Now, last year during the House of Assembly, one of the sessions when government was passing a motion to help to assist the statutory boards, Water Corporation and Anglic, you made mention that the chairman of the Anglic board does not speak to you. Is this still the case? What is your relationship, the current relationship between you and the chairman of the Anglic board?
Well, we do speak. You know, I don't hold any grudges. You know, he is my friend. I'm still trying to mend that friendship. But that's a friendship. But when it comes to business, business is different. And so, you know, it is important for us to ensure that Anglic is viable. Anglic transforms into a different mode of operation as it relates to the way they fuel up. Right now we are using old Wasilla engines that is powered by diesel, that the prices vary significantly, and we want to move into renewable energy integration. And the chairman also shares that vision in terms of renewable energy integration, and I'm sure that he's doing all he can to reach to that end.
We understand that an AGM is coming up quite soon.
Well, not the AGM, there's a special meeting.
A special meeting
is scheduled for the 23rd of March. We want to know the fiscal position of the company. We know that they had some difficulties last year in paying their fuel bills, but they have been current with those. So we just want to know exactly where we are as it relates to the fuel and what have you.
Okay. In terms of the stats that you just presented for the boats, the boat passenger movement and so forth, are all the boats operating?
No, not all the boats are not operational as yet. As you know, initially, I forgot the name of the boat, Joe Davis's boat. Deluxe. Deluxe was the only boat that was operational for a while, but now there are other boats in the water.
It's rumored that another boat, a foreign boat, will come into play. Is that true?
No, that is not true because there's a moratorium on the boats in the water. The moratorium still exists.
It doesn't seem long ago, maybe the beginning of the year, when Anglic wanted to put this 45-cent fuel surcharge, and you negotiated with them not to do it. So what is the difference now?
Back then, there was a need to increase because the legislation gives them the authority to raise the fuel surcharge based on the cost of fuel. That's what the existing legislation does. It's been a long-standing bit of legislation, goes back a couple of decades. I would say that we asked them, we requested of them, and it was up to their discretion whether or not they will hold off on the fuel surcharge increase, and they did so. It was not a situation where it was, you know, acrimonious in any way. And they have announced, as you can see, they already issued a press release stating that as of April 1st, they will be increasing the fuel surcharge. At present, they are losing money on the fuel. They're losing money on that. So we are trying to meet with them again to beg of their good graces and plead with them. I know it's going to be difficult because at the end of the day, it's better to have an operational Anglic than an Anglic that has to have blackouts because they just don't have enough fuel or can't pay for fuel in order to keep them sustainable. So it's going to be a discussion. It's going to be an amicable discussion because all of the discussions that we've had in terms of the fuel surcharge have been quite amicable.
last week the Premier said that the government was going to try to address the increase in the cost of living. And
Yes.
this is not
We are,
gonna
we are
help.
still, we are still discussing that. We met and discussed that as recent as last evening. So no days off. It is something that keeps us all up at night. The cost of living increase is something that is global. It is not unique to Anguilla. And also the cost of freight into Anguilla have increased exponentially and will continue to increase. By April 10th, the cost of freight will go up into this region again. And Anguilla will also be impacted by the increase in cost in freight. So, as you know, there's superinflation, hyperinflation in the United States. There's a significant cost on food, increase in cost on food, and now there's increased cost on fuel. So, of course, we, because that is our most significant trading partner, we are impacted by it. But we are seeing where we can offer some relief, while at the same time ensuring that government can function. And that is a very difficult balancing act.
Good afternoon, Honourable Minister. I have two questions. I heard you rattle out some numbers and figures about what's happening at the airport and at the ports. But I didn't hear you talk on the economic benefits that we have received from those numbers that have been you quote.
There's a number of economic benefits. As you know, the Anguilla Air and Seaports Authority have been severely impacted since March of 2019. And the Anguilla Air and Seaports Authority now is paying its way. A number of entities are paying their way. People are back to work. The construction sector is booming. The heavy equipment in concrete companies can't pour, it's just, they're stretched to capacity. So the economic benefits, I don't want to say trickle down, but the economic benefits is felt throughout the island. And you can see it throughout the island. You can see how busy people are. And persons are working 2 and 3 jobs who wants to, because everybody, some people just like to be busy as well. So the economic benefits, not only to the people of Anguilla is seen, but also last year we did not expect to have a surplus position, and we realized a surplus position, and we used some of that surplus to pay some of the costs for the Water Authority and also for the Anguilla Air and Seaports Authority, and to give back some of the deferred salaries to the Anguilla Civil Service. So it goes without saying, and the fact that we receive record number of accommodation tax in January in the levy, the social development levy, which was the interim stabilization levy, is performing pre-pandemic. It says that the economy is virtually all the way back. And if it is that we can navigate COVID and be in a situation where we are today financially, not only the government of Anguilla, but the people of Anguilla seeing that they can actually go out to work and earn a living, imagine where we will be when we move to the next stage of our protocols when that comes. Of course, you already know that we will evolve our protocols as it relates to entry and movement of people within the next couple of weeks. So we can see that the business prospects will increase. And we know the business prospects will increase because we stay close to the industry. And because we stay close to the industry, they gave us their numbers, and though the industry partners are doing extremely well.
I think we don't want to hear numbers, because numbers doesn't say anything. We want to know the benefits of those numbers, what they have impacted on the island.
And that is true, because at the end of the day, the stats, you don't put stats in a bank account, right? It's people getting out to work. So when I hear the other side saying that the economy is in dire straits, it says to me that they are disconnected from Anguilla and disconnected from what is going on in this country.
Okay, my second is talking about the fuel. How do we purchase fuel? By batch or what? Because my concern is that as soon as, well, Anglec or elsewhere, my concern is that as soon, if today's, you hear in the world market that oil price gone up, suddenly we're hearing that oil price gone up everywhere. And if we are buying by bulk, it's not at the end of that period of that bulk that we have purchased at a rate that that increase should take, and not immediately? Weekly base, okay, okay.
Yeah, every week, I was saying, every week the mic was off. I was saying that every single week that badge comes in with the bulk fuel. They store the fuel, they utilize a significant amount of fuel over that week. The next week, there's an invoice again. And if you look at the invoices, you can see the little variance in the prices. But what is in storage right now reflects what was brought in before. April 1st is going to reflect, I mean, right now, they already, based on the fuel surcharge, they're already losing money. But April 1st, they announced it because the price has already gone up. And so it's a very difficult prospect. And we will go and we will beg them again if they can do something about the fuel surcharge. And, you know, it'll be at their mercies whether or not they will agree to reduce or to flatline or to increase, reduce the increase that they have already announced.
The Hughes, and you are also the Minister of Tourism. There was something mentioned in the broader spectrum that's outside of the news media, that a bag, a lady's bag or whatever to that effect, was purchased by a member of the Anglo Tourist Board, costing a large sum of money. And what was said over there is that the Tourist Board credit card was used for that purchase. And people are saying they never hear the minister or nobody within the Ministry of Tourism address that matter as to whether there's a truth to it. And they're saying that the monies were either paid back or it was just a exchange of funds from one source to the other. Could you shed a light on that, sir?
Mr. Richardson, I appreciate that question. And because these are the questions that need to be asked. And the reason why it was never addressed is because the question was never asked. And the question is now being asked, so I'll address the question. And I'll address the question by making a short story long. We all know that certain banking institutions have difficulty with their cards. And other banking institutions don't have difficulties with their cards. So you and I may travel together, and my card may be at Republic, for example, and your card may be at NBA, and your card failed. Not that you didn't have the funds, but your card failed. And you ask me to borrow my card to make that purchase. And I lend you my card and it goes through. And then you reimburse me my money. So I make that story to say this. This happened some months ago, I believe back in July, where the director of tourism went to purchase a bag using her card, and it did not go through. And she rang back, asked permission from the chairman of the board. The chairman of the board called me about it beforehand, and I said to the chairman, is she reimbursing? He said, yeah, her husband is on the way to the tourist board to deliver the check. So I said, why are you asking me then that? That is not my business. And the purchase was made. 2 months later, it was all over social media. Now, it was fully reimbursed. Interest did not even accrue on the card because it was fully reimbursed. And I can say this, and I'm glad that it came up, because if you look at the Public Accounts Committee that is happening right now, and if you look at any audit of the Anguilla Tourist Board or any of these statutory bodies, you will see instances where credit cards and monies from these institutions were used and never reimbursed. But the director, before interest was even accrued, reimbursed it in full. And that is important to note, so I'm very appreciative of the question. So thank you, sir.
With regards to your latter part, any action will be taken on those persons who you believe would have used a credit card and didn't pay back the monies?
Absolutely. I want to say this, and this relates to me. On coming to office, I received an invoice from the Anguilla Tourist Board of just over $100, stating that when I was parliamentary secretary, way back then that I had an outstanding bill on one of my travel for $134 or something there about, you know. And I was very, you know, I didn't have an issue with it because it could have been true. I didn't need to back check it. But why did it take 6 years, 7 years, you know? So yeah, all of these things will be addressed and will be arrested because transparency is something that is important. And when it comes to taxpayers' dollars, we need to be transparent. So I truly, truly appreciate that question. And these are the type of questions that need to be asked because there's too much gossip that is being spread out there on a particular radio station and in the airways and some of these WhatsApp forwards that goes around. So thank you for that.
My other question has to do now with the road. Right next to the Anglican church, there was an issue regarding a drive-off for the purpose of the horse. You're taking out the bodies and taking them to the church. I was made to understand that there was a little issue there as it relates to that particular section of the road. And the issue with regards to an offset in the road. The horse, I understand, would not be using that area anymore, but it appeared to be dangerous in terms of traffic coming from the north, going to the south, in a sudden offset turn in the road. And I was made to understand that it was placed there by design for the purpose of stopping people. That they didn't say stop, they slow down. They didn't say slow, they say stop. My fear that somebody might end up meeting their demise right on that offset. And it would be better to have it taken out, sir.
You're speaking about,
Yes.
it's not a mistake because I too questioned it in the design. I questioned it as recent as this morning because I thought that, and the road engineers along with the officer said that it was designed that way to slow the traffic coming from the north towards the south. So it's on the southern side of the entrance to the Anglican church.
That's correct.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it was actually by design. It looked curious, but it was by design.
But
And to your point, that does not necessarily mean that the traffic will slow, right? But the markings on the road, including the highlighted paint, will be placed along those curbs as well. So persons just need to pay attention along the road. And as you can see, the road is significantly widened, so you have a lot more room to play with.
Okay, let me go down to Blowing Point now. As it relates to Blowing Point for a terminal, a much larger building, with more traffic. And I know during the time of the Anguilla, the front administration, they had erected 3 jetties down at Center Ground. They are very, Blowing Point, they are very narrow. What plans are in place as it relates to bringing the luggage from the ferries to the main terminal building?
Well, as you know, we see some golf carts coming up, and the porters are utilizing golf carts. But when we came to office, the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal was virtually lost. And then there was a plan, there were some acquired lands, and there was the plan to build the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal way up the hill in Blowing Point. And immediately we said, no, we want that Blowing Point Ferry Terminal back in the original footprint. And we were able to discuss with the governor at the time, Mr. Tim Foy, and Mr. Darren Forbes Beatty, and all of the technical folks to get the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal back, and also to get the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal in the footprint that it is now, which is significantly closer to the water's edge as it was envisioned many years ago. And I say many years ago because Hurricane Irma occurred on September the 6th of 2017. So it is much closer. The other slip that you speak about, that is used for fueling and maintenance, and the other 2 slips is used for passenger movements. We don't foresee, even with increased traffic, we don't foresee any difficulties as it relates to boats and passengers traversing that area. We don't foresee it. It may be possible, you may be right, it may have some difficulties, but we try to look at all of the modeling, and we don't foresee any problems. Given the fact that we have to look at our best movements through the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal in the best years and so forth, and we didn't have any real difficulties even when multiple boats were docked there. What was the difficulty was the bottleneck inside of the Blowing Point, the original Blowing Point Ferry Terminal. It was a significant bottleneck. That bottleneck will be alleviated based on the space that we have, the amount of the amount of custom operators that we're going to have down there. And the way this blowing point ferry terminal is designed, it's designed to take into consideration the customer. And that is important to us. And we're not talking about only tourists, we're talking about Anguillians and anyone who traverses the blowing point ferry terminal.
So you are saying so that the buggy carts will be used to transfer the luggage from the ferries to the terminal building? But those walls are very small for
Yeah,
luggage.
but they are using them now. And everybody's not going to use a porter, you know, but
So
they're using them
They're
now.
going to be a bidding process?
For porters?
Yeah.
No. The porters are freelancers.
Wow.
So they work for themselves. They're self-employed. They do not receive a salary. They rely solely on the graces of the persons that they offer the service to.
Are there any more questions? Oh, yes.
Answer a quick question on an online question from someone who said that, I don't know where these people get this information from, right? But that the Valley Main Road will cost $10 million if it means more taxes to the people of Anguilla. And I want to make it clear again for the 70th time that the funding for the Carteret Boulevard, the Valley Main Road, is being funded through a United Kingdom Economic Resilience Program and not from the taxpayers of Anguilla. And I don't know how many more times that will be said, because the individual who asked that question continue to ask the same question. And I want to say that the Valley Main Road, the Carteret Boulevard, is fully funded, 100% funded through that very same resilience fund.
Spanish liaison officer.
A question from online. I heard the government of Angola wants to strengthen the use of the EC dollar on island. Can you please let us know if this would affect the salaries made in a positive or negative way? Would employers be able to reduce people's salaries or give them the equivalent?
That is malicious, that is a lie, and that is made up by some devilish individual, because there is no plans to scrap the US dollar in Angola. None whatsoever. It has never even been a discussion about scrapping the US dollar. So thank you for that question. Hopefully this clarifies it. Please record it and use it as a meme if you have to.
As relates to the market, sir, and the portering service,
My mic was off.
okay?
No, I was saying, Jeanette, that notion that the government of Angola plans to scrap the use of US dollars in Angola is a lie. It is malicious, has never even been a discussion. US dollars is important to us because how we trade in Angola, most of our invoices, especially out of the United States of America, is paid in US dollars. And if we were to do that, we'd be killing ourselves and killing our economy. That will not happen, and I don't see any time in the future that will happen.
But you know, Mr. Hughes, that Anguilla is governed by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank as relates to monies, both US and EC.
Yeah.
And if it's a directive from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, or maybe to the governor or somebody, where would Anguilla stand in this?
We'll just come on the ECCB.
To the point.
End of story.
My last question, sir, has to do with vendors around the roadside. We are fixing up the market, and I'm wondering if something could be done to ensure that as much persons use the market as possible, because all over to the Valley Central, you see people, little stalls set up here, there, and everywhere.
That is an issue of enforcement. If you go to the people's market, you'll realize that there's a number of stalls now. Each one of those stalls have water, and I believe there are more than 10 stalls at the people's market, and they're provision for more persons to be there. So there's no reason for it. You know, persons will be able to utilize that, and we have more stalls than actual vendors along the Carteret Boulevard.
So, still my question, so, is whether or not it will be mandatory that most of those folks who use the side of the road to sell the provision would now have to go, should be allowed or permitted to go to, forced to go to the market and sell their produce there?
It's already mandatory, you know.
So why is not happening?
It's a crisis of enforcement, like many things.
Wow. Talk to Ken.
He's not an enforcement officer, he's just a lawmaker.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Okay, before we wrap up, I move to Labour. For the absence of the Minister of Education, she had to dash off the conference that she spoke about in her presentation. So on Friday last, I would have provided an update, a statement on Friday, and this afternoon I wish to provide an update to that statement. I'll read it for you. You'll have been provided with copies of it, so I'll just read it for you. Yes, I would have given each member of you should have a copy in front of you. So for the purposes of those listening via radio and those on the social media, I will go through it. Statement by the Honourable Minister of Labour, Monday, 14th March 2022. Good afternoon. I would like to provide an update to the statement which I would have circulated on Friday, March 11th, 2022. On July 28th, 2021, I approved a temporary work permit for Mr. Stephen Sakari as the construction consultant at Aurora Anguilla Resort and Golf Club. That permit, like all work permits granted, was subject to the normal and thorough vetting procedure currently used by the Labour Department. This includes a current police record for the applicant, valid for the past 10 years, which is sent to the RAPF for independent verification, medical record, as well as copies of relevant certificates and other proof of qualifications. On January 31st, 2022, workers at the resort reported to me that they were sent home by Mr. Sakari, and they complained of his behavior. I immediately contacted the management of the resort, who indicated that they did not know anything about the situation. I was happy that as a result of my intervention, the matter was rectified so that the workers were back at work the following day and did not lose any pay. In early February 2022, I took the position that the work permit for Mr. Sakari would not be renewed. However, the property pointed out that Mr. Sakari's work was under warranty, and in the event that he had to leave, his sub-project would have ended, and the workers would have to be sent home because there would have been no one to supervise and train them to be certified in the installation of the product. My concern for the workers was paramount. I therefore agreed to allow the extension of Mr. Sakari's work permit up to and ending April 30th, 2022, to allow the work to be completed and avoid the loss of Anguillan workers' jobs, which could not be avoided if Mr. Sakari left the island at that time. That was the agreement made between myself, the Ministry, and Department of Labour and the resort. Subsequently, documents surfaced and were brought to my attention regarding alleged criminality on the part of Mr. Sakari. I shared this information immediately with the RAPF, Red Anguilla Police Force, the Labour Department, and the Aurora property. However, because of this matter getting into the public domain and causing much tension and concern in the community, I have seen it fit, in order to allay public fears and concerns, by requesting the resort to have Mr. Sakari leave the island immediately. He would have left today. I also asked the property not to send home the Anguillan workers, but find a way to retain the employment status. I am indeed happy and thankful that the management of the resort are considering my request to retain the employees while Mr. Sakari is being replaced. The ministry has always been very clear with the resort's ownership as to its concerns and commitment to have Anguillans employed at the resort. I am happy that the resort's ownership and management shares government's views as to this, and often collaborate to see that this is accomplished. These are some of the positive issues I would have liked to have seen ventilated on the various media platforms. I would like to reassure our Anguillan workers that I, the Minister of Labour, the Ministry and Department of Labour and the government are always looking out for and working on behalf of our people. Thank you. Did the mic cut out? Okay. So I'll take questions.
Mr. Hodge, based on your statement, you said that, like all work permits, it went through the normal, thorough vetting procedure. However, information later came to light about his criminal background. Would the Ministry of Labour perhaps now, because of this situation, change its vetting procedure?
The procedures that are used for vetting are sound and they work. They have been in use for many years. This information, a prospective employer has to provide a criminal record from the country of origin of the person. That record is then sent to the RAPF for verification.
How come this wasn't picked up before, though?
It's the period that we are looking at is for a period of 10 years. 10 years.
So it was given Anguilla.
Sorry? No. It's for a period of 10 years prior to the application. For the past 10 years, yes.
So perhaps now you'll widen your scope beyond 10 years?
Felicia, let me be very candid, right?
Because based on this situation, you asked that he leave the island.
I have not seen, no. Let me very, our concerns with the gentleman had to do with his behavior, his attitude with the workers. There are allegations of criminal conduct, and as I say, there are allegations. There's information circulating out there that I have not seen, I cannot comment on or speculate on. There was some information provided to me that I immediately sent it to the authorities for verification. But at the end of the day, the procedures that are used by the department are tried and tested, and they work.
How many employees are on the site?
Sorry?
How many employees on the job that were involved with the consultant, working closely with the consultant?
From my recollection, it was, I believe, somewhat in excess of 7 persons. I cannot speak to the exact number, but it was quite a few persons indeed.
Is this the first time a termination of such happened under your watch?
Is there?
Is this the first termination of the kind as it relates to work permits?
No.
Okay.
No. I have done several in my time. Of course, that doesn't make the social media platforms. But again, as I've often said, I don't run my ministry on social media. You understand? So, but we do what we have to do to maintain a good balance in the labor market.
Minister Hodge.
Yes, sir.
My question, sir, is in relation to your involvement as Minister of Labour and the particular hotel in question. A lot is being said out there and is pointing to what among, quote unquote, to a friendliness between you as Minister of Labour and the hotel, whether it's the proprietors or what have you. I listened, I read your statement, I listened to it, but what I get coming out is that a lot of the concerns are channeled from the hotel to you as minister. Why they're not going to the right source, which is the Department of Labor, who is now the Labor Commissioner, and then what the Labor Commissioner can handle, then they direct to you. I don't think it won't look right.
Mr. Richardson?
Hold on.
No, let me stop you there right there, because you're treading down a path.
Which path I'm treading down?
Let me indicate something to you. I have always indicated to workers from the time I have got into office,
Yes, sir.
that their first port of call for any issues is the Labor Department. However, I cannot stop if somebody stops me or calls me to outline an issue. I cannot, in all honesty, cut them off and say, look, you go there. I listen to them, but I also tell them, go to the Labor Department. That's always has been my message. It's unfortunate, Mr. Richardson, I mean very candid,
Yes, sir.
that persons are not being truthful in when they're presenting information to the public. I think as members of the media, we have a responsibility to be fair, to be correct, accurate when we are presenting information to the public. That has been my concern. As a former media person myself, I spent some 13 or 14 years as a media person, journalist, broadcaster, and manager of a radio station. So it's really unfortunate that these kinds of statements continue to surface, alleging relationships. Let me say here in front of the camera, in front of the wall, I have no friendly relationship with any property in Anguilla. I'm not paid by any property in Anguilla. I do my work fair and square as the people of Anguilla have elected me to do, and I will continue to do that as long as the Lord gives me health and strength to do so. I'm sorry if I cut you off, by the way.
Your statement said on the 31st of January 2022, workers at the resort reported to me that they were sent home by Mr. Sikari and they complained of his behavior. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
And further down, you said you had discussions with the owners, quote unquote, of the hotel. What I'm saying, sir, in such a case, the complaints were made to you. The complaint should have been made to the labor commissioner.
Maybe I wasn't explicit enough.
On the letter?
The morning, okay, I will take that. The morning of January 31st,
Yes, sir.
I was on my way to work, and I turned down here by the bank to go across, and I met a number of workers there standing up. I stopped and I asked them, and they explained to me they were on their way up to the Labor Department. And based on information is when I proceeded to do what I had to do. You understand me? The workers came to the Labor Department as they knew they had to come. They were there to lodge their complaint. I was able to call and get them back to work the next day so they did not lose any pay. But the workers were downstairs at the Labor Department to register their complaints.
I'm only making the points up from the feedback that is coming from outside as it relates to your involvement. I've never been a minister, never reached that position, but yet, I must say yet too. But I would have liked to see the ministers off the record in this case. Whatever have to be done, once the Department of Labor can handle it through the director, then it come to me. I wouldn't be getting up and calling no hotel.
I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll deal with it.
Y'all may have to clarify that with the public. Okay,
Yeah, Minister, let me.
Minister, yeah, that's anything.
We are elected. The people elect us, Mr. Richardson. They elect us. When they have difficulties, they come to the minister they elect. Yes, we have the departmental agencies to deal with it. But the first persons for are ministers, they put in office. When they come to me yesterday with them, where they are to go, we as ministers, I guess we are one of the few places that we have such access to ministers. Because in other places, you can't get near a minister. You understand? Mm-hmm. So maybe we are too free in Anguilla. But anytime there are issues, the first person those people look for are the elected representatives. Yes, sir.
I believe that's setting a bad precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's changing a bit.
Yeah.
People will always seek out
Yeah.
the elected representatives, always, for even
Yeah.
mundane issues. And you got to listen to the people.
Yeah.
Because we go by people's houses asking for a vote. And
Yeah.
how you can go to people's houses asking for a vote, and then when people come, you're telling them, oh, I can't listen to you.
Yeah.
Well, it happened with the GST, so.
No, but of course we listen to the people. If we didn't listen to the people, the legislation that we found when we came to office would be in place right now.
Yeah. Anyway,
And we still continue to reconfigure that legislation and by, to ensure that the least burden to the people is felt. I just want to say something quickly, Mr. Richardson. Back when Barnesby Development was here, Viceroy, persons came into Anguilla under the United Front administration who had tuberculosis, who were infected with tuberculosis, could have caused a significant outbreak here in this country. And nobody uttered a word. And it was through intelligence that was brought to us in the media, because at that time I was in the media too, is how we were able to bust apart that we had tuberculosis, and the minister at the time, Evan McNeil Rogers, acknowledged afterwards that yes, indeed, there were persons who were down on the camp, the internment camp, who had tuberculosis.
So the media were working then?
Yeah, media continues to work.
Anyway, do we have any further questions?
Yes, two questions.
Yes,
one from Mr. Hughes and another one for Mr. Hart. Mr. Hughes, it had to do with, I know there was quite a while, there was an issue with whatever contractual arrangements were made with Lloyd's Aviation and his operations at the then Wall-Blake Airport and government. There were a number of issues, quote unquote, that I wouldn't want to bring. Okay, you probably might have an idea.
I don't have any knowledge of that. I don't have any knowledge of any issues between Lloyd's Aviation and the government of Anguilla.
There are no issues between Lloyd's Aviation and the government?
No, there's no issues between the government of Anguilla and Lloyd's Aviation, as of now.
So there wouldn't have to be some sort of negotiation between Lloyd's Aviation and the government of Anguilla, whether this one or that one, as related to the expansion and what have you?
No, absolutely none. No negotiations. We advised that this is what we're doing. As a matter of fact, the airport, when we came to office, the airport was under threat of closing down due to the slippage on the strip. And so it was one of the things that we had to prioritize in terms of not, the PCN wasn't the original goal, but just to ensure that ASSE did not close the airport down. But we were able to increase the PCN because the aggregate that was brought in, and that aggregate came from all the way in Canada, because we could not find aggregate in the region that was dense enough to increase the PCN. And without that increase in PCN through the aggregate that was brought in from Canada, we could not have American Airlines today. And so it is important to note that. But as far as I am aware, and I believe Mr. David Lloyd can go on record, there's no contention between Lloyd's Aviation and the government of Anguilla. As a matter of fact, Lloyd's Aviation does the ground handling for American Airlines and brought in a step specifically for American Airlines. And as I said before, we are very excited that American Airlines will be increasing their capacity in April of this year to 7 flights per week and possibly 8 flights a week. But right now it's going to be 7 flights a week.
I'll stand on that one, and maybe next time I probably might do a little bit more research.
Definitely.
The last question to Minister Hart.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to, I think the question might have been better directed to the Minister of Finance, but he's not here, so I take it for granted that I could probably pose it to you. We know prior to now, there was no issue with the war. The war between Ukraine and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It is my understanding, and maybe a lot of people understanding, that these are going to be some hard times as it relates to what happened with the war. We don't know how long the war would last. So my question to you, sir, is whether or not the government might consider deferring the GST implementation in July of 2022 if this war persists for a very long time and things get out of hand.
Well, Mr. Richardson, as you know, responsibility for foreign affairs is vested in the governor of Anguilla, and I believe sometime today she would have put out a statement. I'm not sure if she's published that yet, but she's due to put out a statement sometime today on what's happening, and certainly this administration continues to monitor the situation as it develops. I just want to say, though, going back to your earlier questions, I just want to say here again, and I've said it on many occasions, to the workers out there, when you're having any issues, your first port to go to is your HR department at whatever resort or business you are working at. That is the first place you go with issues. The second place would be the labor department if you're not getting anywhere with that. And the minister becomes the third and final port of call. Why I'm stressing this? Because a lot of these times, these matters end up before the court, they end up before tribunals, they end up in all kinds of other places. And process becomes important, and when process is not followed, sometimes it can impact the way that these matters are dealt with. So I just want to reiterate that. But as elected members, I think when our constituents stop us to talk to us, it's a little difficult to say, you know, another time for you go find a department. You know, that's a little difficult. Maybe we need to change that behavior sometime coming down the road. Yes. So yes, Mr. Pickering.
No, I have a question, but this doesn't deal with the matter of labor. The EU is moving to scrap this citizen by investment program, and I know we have been here trying to develop something like that. How would that affect us?
We are not doing citizenship by investment. We know that this is something that has been contentious for a very long time. You know, even Malta have had issues with citizens by investment. But if you look at the United States and the United Kingdom, they have a quasi-citizenship by investment. We have a residency by investment program, and these are persons who are residents of Anguilla. Anguilla does not control its consular affairs. Anguilla does not control its visa affairs. Anguilla does not control its foreign affairs. Anguilla does not grant, the elected members of government does not grant citizenship to nobody. Persons who are born in Anguilla of Anguillan parents. That is completely controlled by Her Majesty's government in Anguilla. So even as it relates to the residency by investment program, that is something that comes to Executive Council, is vetted, and then is granted. But usually it's granted for someone who has already acquired an alien landholding license. And that person already went through a rigorous amount of vetting in order to acquire alien landholding license.
That to make it very clear, because people will be taking this and mixing it up with what we are having here, which is resident.
I want to say something too. St. Kitts went through COVID, and they were able to take care of its citizens for a prolonged period of time, Dominica as well. And the monies that they had in reserves that were able to grant extra salaries and the like came from its CIB program, its citizenship program. Removing that citizenship program from those particular countries put them at a significant disadvantage, because if you look at the development of St. Kitts over the last 2 decades, that was driven through the CIB program. By taking that away, you really is going to impact that country significantly, dramatically, and it's similar with Offshore Financial Services. So this is why I've always said that tourism is the most resilient and reliable industry there is. And a lot of persons may say, well, COVID-19 impacted tourism, but it also impacted every industry in the world, including manufacturing. People had to work from home, and you can't manufacture from home. Whatever industry it was, they were impacted significantly. And who got rich during the COVID pandemic? Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and the like, in these particular niche businesses. So yes, it is important that we diversify the economy of Anguilla, but diversification of the economy of Anguilla does not come from the government of Anguilla. The government of Anguilla just needs to set up the framework so that you can diversify. So if you come with a novel idea, a great idea, and you sit with government, then government is supposed to work on those policies to ensure that that novel idea that can diversify the economy comes to fruition. But we cannot expect, I hear people saying, oh, why the Anguilla doesn't have a movie theater? But the government of Anguilla will not invest in a movie theater. It is you to look at the feasibility of having a movie theater in a country that has 15,000 people and see whether or not that is viable. So whatever diversification program it is, it's supposed to emanate from the private sector. Government just supposed to ensure that the framework is in there so that you can move forward with that diversification program that you have, whatever the idea is.
Any more questions? Okay, if not, I want to thank you all for having joined us here this afternoon. Thank the Anguillan Mr. Elkin Richardson, independent journalist, I think he calls himself, the Herald newspaper, the Anguilla newspaper, Radio Anguilla. Of course, our Spanish-speaking liaison officer and our special ministerial assistant, as well as to thank our good guys from Dites facilitating technical coverage of our press conference. We look forward to welcoming you next week, same time, same place. As the Premier says, if it's a Monday and not a holiday, we will be here. Thank you.